right.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today we are talking to some, how should I put this? Goddamn sword and sorcery royalty here. We're talking to Mr. David C. Smith, an author of many, many years. This guy, his work goes back all the way to the 70s. I've got some examples here from my own personal library. He's the author of Oron. He's the author of The Sorcerer's Shadow, Tales of Attluma. With Richard Tierney, he did the Red Sonja novels. For those who remember those ones, those are pretty damn good too. He's written a whole bunch of stuff since then. His latest writing is going to be in an upcoming anthology, Beating Hearts and Battle Axes. Courtesy of the same people responsible for New Edge Sword and Sorcery magazine. Mr. David C. Smith, welcome to the show.
Thank you very, very much. Bastian, am I pronouncing it correctly? Bastian?
Bastien, I've been called Damien at least once or twice, so I'm not exactly too picky about this kind of thing.
Damien, like
I'm
in
an
the
Anglophone
movie.
who lives in French Canada. You
Oh,
get what
sure.
you get what you can get.
Yeah.
I mean, hell, my pronunciation of foreign names can be downright abysmal at times. So I I've kept mispronouncing Skylar Hernstrom as Schuler Hernstrom for the longest time.
I did that for years.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did it for years.
So I'm no one to throw stones when it comes to name
Uh,
pronunciations.
and when I meet people from other cultures and I check out a guy's like, look, I'm a Dave Smith from the American Midwest. It's like, it's not a
That
challenge.
is like peak American right there. American Midwest and Texas are probably peak American.
I think so. I agree with you. I agree with you. I know people dismiss it as flyover country. No, man, we're the real stuff. I mean, I'm from Ohio. We live in Chicago now. My wife and I, she's from around Pittsburgh. I mean, this is heartland stuff. This is the real people.
Yeah. I mean, that is, I think, something that really authors, the ones that really stuck around, like, from Howard onward, I think a lot of them come from those kinds of backgrounds where Howard may never have left Cross Plains, Texas for the most part, but a lot of people came around there. And I think that had a serious impact on his writing. Just, the oil boom town, how that impacted the development of Conan and stuff like that, the people it ran into. Would you say the same thing about your upbringing in Ohio and Chicago for own writing?
Yeah, it's there. Um, because where I grew up with Liberty Township, which is in Warren, Ohio. It's kind of between downtown Warren and downtown Youngstown, Ohio, and I wound up graduating from Youngstown State University. Um, it's it's an interesting area because on the one hand, I mean, where I grew up, there was still farmland all over. I had an uncle,
Mm-hmm.
you know, farther out in Gustavus County. It's a wonderful name. But then in Liberty Township, you also had, because it was a very comfortable setting, um, uh, wealthy folks, not wealthy, but people who'd made it, like first generation doctors, lawyers, people like that,
Yeah.
bought wooded lots and built very nice homes. Um, a girl I went to high school with, her dad, it was the Strauss family, and that was a chain of department stores back then, when we had
Yeah, I
that.
think I've heard the name.
Yeah, Strauss's department store. And Mr. Strauss, he was probably like third or fourth, probably third generation, maybe fourth. But he had money, and so he liked to play polo. And in fact, when I was in high school, I like to make movies, homemade movies, and I
Mhm.
made like a version of The Mummy, and I made science fiction movies, and I made a western, and we used Mr. Strauss's polo ponies. So there was.
Polo is just such a. It's one of those sports you immediately associate with money, isn't it? It's like
It is. It is. It is.
it's not the kind of
What's it?
sport you play in Southside Bronx. You know what I mean? Is all I'm saying.
No, not at all. Not at all. Flash Gordon was a polo player, like in the first comics. I mean, he barely.
Yeah,
Who
they made
knows?
it. Yeah, okay. He was originally a polo player.
Yeah, Flash Gordon was in the comics.
Huh.
Yeah,
In the comics,
yeah.
yeah, the movie they made him a football player.
He was a football player in the movie. Yeah.
Yeah, and they made good advantage of that for that one scene.
Well, you know what? I wonder in the very first movie in '36. I don't know if they say what. Maybe they do it. I
Hmm.
know that the satire they made in the '80s Anyway, this is really off center, but yeah, it's
Yeah.
Liberty Township, but everything around there. We're in Ohio at one time. It was actually a center for the Underground Railroad back in the time of the Civil War. But there wasn't a lot of industry around there. It was other stuff.
Mhm.
Youngstown was purely a steel town, you know, um, and everything revolved around the steel mills on the south side and close to downtown and everything. And because there was so much money to be had there from the steel workers, you had a lot of taverns, lining the streets going down to the mills. Um, the I was going to say brothels, but that's an old word for it. But there was women to be had,
Mhm.
all kinds of gambling and that kind of stuff. The numbers racket was huge,
Mm. That
and
does
it
sound a
was
bit
all right
like
by the Ohio.
how yeah, that does sound a bit how Howard described Cross Plains back in his day.
It's got to be exactly the same kind of people, I mean, it really is. You get these folks, and they're there to make money off, anybody they can, to drink a lot. Um, it was a rough town, you know. Um, now I'm not a tough guy. I never got involved with any of that kind of stuff. I was kind of on the fringe. I knew some guys and stuff. Everybody knew somebody, or they knew
Yeah.
somebody who knew somebody. Um, but the atmosphere of it was great. So on the one hand, my dad liked the outdoors. He was a hunter and fisherman, so I went hunting with him. We went fishing, and then my brother and I. So on the one hand, I like the outdoorsy stuff. I got to be a pretty good shot, and all this stuff, and handle firearms. Um, on the other hand, here's this very coarse, kind of gritty urban kind of thing.
Mhm.
Cities. What is this was a Subo tie in the John Millie's way? Cities
Civilization,
ancient
old
and
and
wicked.
wicked.
Ancient and wicked. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Oh,
that's
let's not waste any time.
no, exactly. Yeah, let's waste no
God,
time.
I love that movie.
It's wonderful. That thing is full of so many good lines.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there it is. Um, but my mailing address was Girard, Ohio, which is a little town. And again, there was steel there, and exclusion plants and that kind of stuff. Um, because Liberty Township didn't have its own mail delivery system, so Girard, Ohio, did that for us. And so when I was a kid, Eric Sattler and I would drive on our bikes down to Girard, buy comic books and stuff. But uh, let's see. It's getting to a point here, which is that Gordon Linsner, a few years later, when I started selling short stories to Space and Time magazine, the great Space and Time back in the '70s when it first started, or I guess late '60s it started, but
Mhm.
in the early '70s when Gordon was pretty much buying whatever I sent him, he liked the writing, and he's in Manhattan. I mean, I visited one time in an apartment in Manhattan, and he was like, I'm in New York. There's a million writers in New York, right? He said, you're probably the only writer in Girard, Ohio. So like appreciate that fact. Um, the problem is there was nobody to guide me, no one to learn from. You know, all I knew was what I read, so it was very much like pitching in the dark. But
Yeah.
you learn,
Well, then again, you learn your own style based on that versus being taught how to do it. So
it
it's a
was.
completely different approach to things.
I have I really don't care for the idea of writers conferences and learning to write that way and everything. I think it's from my experience, and when I've talked to other writers, you just get out there and by the seat of your pants learn it on your own. It could be a little rougher, but you do develop your own voice.
Yeah.
Now early on, I mean, I was a huge fan of Jack London. I've got so many old used hardcovers, of Jack London. In the '70s, you go around to used bookstores, and there was tons of ancient stuff there. It's not true anymore. It was just there to pick
True.
up for a dime or a quarter. And I bought a large library of that stuff. Still have most of it.
Yeah, so do I. I still got a couple of things that I picked up.
There you go. That's it.
Yes, these ones, however, I did have to get online because since then, the used bookstore market is kind of dropped.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry,
books.
your voice went out for a second. What were you
Okay.
saying?
Well, what I was saying is one of the things that it's always been harder for me to find used books like sci-fi and fantasy in Quebec simply because if I'm looking for English, well, the amount of stuff that's available is already kind of low,
Oh,
and
yeah,
then yeah, and then you have the used book market kind of like going downhill ever since online resellers and stuff like that.
right.
Which means basically I just got to order online. I got these ones at Thrift Books, which is a really good resource.
I,
So
I,
yeah.
I, I use thrift books. That's a great edition of Oron that looks almost new.
Oh yeah, this one here, if I'm not mistaken,
That's
Zebra
nice.
Books.
Yeah,
Let's
it's pretty
see.
good.
Let's see if I can find when it was published. This one, first printing, June 1978.
First printing. Yeah, came out in
Yeah.
June that year.
Yeah. Really
Yeah,
good shape too, with all the
it's in
illustrations and
really good
everything.
shape.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's got all the illustrations and everything. And all my little
Clyde
bookmarks with cool
Caldwell
bits.
did those great illustrations. The only thing I disagree with him about is in the book, Oren's a young man,
Yeah.
maybe at the old age of 30, and he drew him as a Frazetta barbarian, which sold the book, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, you know how it is back then in those ancient times, people grew up quick. So
They did. That's it. That's right. You grew
yeah,
up
you look
quick
at a
and you didn't.
20-year-old from the 30s.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
You look at a picture of someone in their 20s from the 1930s, and they already look like they're in their 40s sometimes.
Yeah, I just saw a photo online. Looks like a Dorothea Lange photo from the Great Depression. That's a picture of a guy, and the point of it is in the caption. This man is like 30 years old, and he's got his little boy there. This guy looks like 60 years old. Christ only knows what hardship he's had to go through.
Yeah.
Wow, really, really
Yeah,
tough life.
that's the kind of world that gave birth to sword and sorcery right there. That post World War, Great Depression American
I
culture right there.
I feel very strongly that the Great Depression um, had a strong influence on it is the fact that Howard being in Texas and being in Cross Plains,
Yeah.
because he was right in the middle of writing freelance fiction, just pitching it out there, and I I'm really interested in that period of American history, that first half of the 20th century, and then when you get into the post-war era, it's interesting. But I kind of
Yeah.
made up my point when I was a young man, like I was in college, especially in Youngstown, around YSU, Youngstown State University. Any oldster, any old person I found, I made a point of asking them what it was like when they were my age and they were a kid. So that would have been the 20s or the 30s. Fascinating period. I mean,
Mhm.
I wrote a biography of Robert E. Howard. I called it literary biography. I
Yes, you
followed
did.
him year by year because I'm a writer and he was a writer, so I wanted to see what happened as I did that. And it led to some interesting things. But one of the points I make is that the 1920s, um, that's where our modern world starts, and it was modern, the poetry
Yeah.
and movie making and everything. Um, but I put a line in there saying that we can look back at 1920 and it's really familiar to us. Maybe it's silent movies, but it's sports and people with fashion contests and they have money to spend. And newspapers are all about sports and politics and stuff. You go from 1920 back to 1820.
It's
It's
night
like,
and day.
yeah, it's night and day. So the 20s is where this stuff really happened. And
Yeah.
Howard is a writer. I mean, he was writing in the vernacular, which started with Jack London and Frank Norris and some writers before him. But I mean, that's what the pulps did. I mean, finally had this population that readers. And even though they were dismissed in their time as supposedly they were dismissed in their time as being junk, they were pulp
And yet people
magazines.
bought them in stores.
People bought them like crazy. And what I found very interesting, this is an anecdote here, but how Howard's, what was the story? The Blackstone, I think the Blackstone
Mhm.
was nominated to be in the O. Henry collection from 1933, I think. That collection of American short stories. It was the O. Henry collection of the best
Yeah.
American short stories. And So I went online and I found a copy. It's kind of beat up. It's an old library. Nobody wants it anymore except me. And sure enough, I looked in the back, and here were the runners up, you know, of writers and stories. And first of all, there's a ton of pulp magazines. So this distinction that somebody started making that caught on, that the pulps were junk, probably based on their covers, you know.
The covers, and I think it started around the time of Joseph Campbell and the that era of when really people were really starting to go for the the distinction between like literary science fiction and stuff like that. Where there was
Yes,
that, and that led to a bit of a denigration. You know how it is with a lot of people. In order to
exactly,
punch up, you have to punch down on everything else that came before you.
exactly. So somebody can be kind of elitist and snobbish, and
Mm.
and somebody else, in fact, I remember reading somewhere. It was recently. It was I'm all over online. I look at Arts and Letters Daily and all these literary things. And someone pointed out that, I mean, in the teens and 20s, a century ago, um, a person would read a Somerset Maugham novel. Okay, that's a mainstream novel, Um, and then they might read Virginia Woolf, or they might
Mhm.
read, James Joyce. Then they might go back and read another author. It, no one no one really made that distinction. It
Yeah.
was all literature. And in fact, Howard has this quote where he says, "I was the first person to light the torch or whatever, the flame of literature, in this part of Texas." Well, now we think of literature as being Tom Sawyer and the
Yeah. Highfalutin.
yeah, the highfalutin stuff, and there are people now, particularly in New York, who just write literary fiction, basically navel gazing stuff.
Oh
It's
yeah.
really weird. I don't care for it at all, and it's now it's a genre unto itself.
Yeah, exactly. I
You
mean,
know,
when you think about it, what was I going to say? Like a lot of the literary classics. I've got
yeah,
Alexandre Dumas somewhere up there on my shelf there.
sure,
That was put out serialized in
right,
in magazines. Everything from Edgar Rice Burroughs to
yes,
Mark Twain and stuff like that. All these stuff,
yes,
all the books that a lot of these classic novels didn't originally come out as hardback classic novels. They
not
were
at all.
serialized in the
They were
periodicals
serialized,
of their day. They were
exactly,
first came out.
exactly. That's
Everything
exactly
from
right.
everything from Hemingway to Dumas to Edgar Rice Burroughs to Robert E. Howard, Lovecraft, Clark Ashton Smith, you name them.
This trend tendency, I don't know, whatever, to make this distinction between worthwhile literature and pulp fiction or whatever, it does a disservice. I mean, right now we're seeing a boom in sword and sorcery fiction, and I
Yeah,
think it does a real disservice to young writers who are trying to write sword and sorcery because they haven't read Chekhov. Okay, they haven't read Tolstoy. Maybe if they're lucky, they read Gatsby once.
watch
Well,
the
it should be
movie.
reread every year. I mean, it's it's for the writing, it's for the depth, it's for developing character. I mean, watch movies or read plays or scripts, create characters that an actor would want to portray. If you do that, if someone takes a look at it and says, well, what can I do with this character? If you've given us something they can do with that character, you're going to have a really good story, and it's going to come as much from the protagonist and antagonist and whoever else is there as it is from whatever kind of plot you have.
Yeah,
Plot comes from characters.
exactly.
Now
Yeah, the plot is the decisions the character
that's exactly it. That's
influences.
exactly it. Now I know in the old days, I mean, you can plot stories. You can write. I talked to Michael Black, who's written tons of stuff. He was an ex police officer, and he's written like executioner stories and stuff. And this is true pulp. I mean, that really
Oh
relies
yeah.
upon plot.
Oh man, and when I was going through old used bookstores, there was
Yeah,
always like a stack of Pendletons, yeah, the Executioner and
tons
stuff
of
like
that
that.
stuff.
Yeah,
Tons of that stuff.
yeah.
Um,
In the
and
French
it's
equivalent, you have Bob Moran with from Henri Verne. I got a bunch of those that I'm collecting
okay.
over the years, and that's basically the same kind of thing. It's like that somewhere in there, and it's just like one self-contained adventure, maybe referencing some previous events and stuff like that. But
A bit. Yeah,
it's just there to have a really damn good time, and they were pumping these things out and just making sure that okay, what crazy adventure can I send these characters on next? That kind of thing.
exactly. And they're typing as fast as they can think, just about, and
Mhm.
people are going to be reading them as fast as they can.
Exactly.
And it's entertainment. The thing that we've lost, I think we're kind of living in a post-literate society now. I don't
Mm.
know if that's true in Quebec, but
Suffice.
I think of it as being kind of European, which to me is always like, oh, Europeans, there's so much, Canadians are like Americans in a way, but they're better than us, so
Don't give us that much credit. We're European adjacent at best.
the
Well, especially
European
Quebec, we're
there
very
you go.
French adjacent in certain ways, but we have McDonald's the same as you. Okay, so don't
There you go.
give
There you
us
go.
too much credit.
I, I'm probably biased because, or at least that little notion is, a buddy of mine went up to Quebec. This is years ago in the '70s. Rick, my friend Rick went up to Quebec, and he knew very little French, but I mean, it's bilingual. He'd get by. But he said he's taken buses to go everywhere, and he said people at the bus stop are standing there reading books, and it's like you never see that in Youngstown, Ohio. Okay?
Well, these days I got their phones out, so it's
Well, I was gonna say now I'm sure it's very different, but
yeah.
but if anyone goes back and reads these stories, these popular fiction stories from between the wars, especially someone like Howard or Lovecraft, who
Mm.
overwrites, but or Lovecraft or any of these people that were writing and everything, their vocabularies are pretty large. You have
Oh
to be a
yeah,
pretty good. You have to be an educated reader to read this stuff. You
yeah.
just
One
do.
thing I've noticed is the reading grade requirements for understanding
Yeah.
of older text is
Oh
always
boy.
like here, and modern text is usually around
Yeah.
here
Yeah.
at best.
What most instructional literature is written for now? I believe it's still grade 6.
Yeah.
I don't think it's fallen to grade 5. I had a friend in the Army years ago, the U.S. Army, and he had to write instructional manuals. He's a captain, so he wrote this for, and he had to. I've got a copy somewhere of the test. I forget the name of it, but he had to write to a 6th grade level. So now I think it's still 6th grade. It had to be a grade 8 or 10 level, back then. And in fact, during my sojourns in old used bookstores, I'd pick up anything that looked vaguely interesting. And one of them was it was a classroom book. It was a textbook for the 8th grade, and this is from 1913,
Mhm.
1918. Okay, and in the last part of the book, after you've gone through most of the year, you're being asked to read sections not just from Dickens, but who wrote like wrote all the countryside stuff, and George
Mhm.
Eliot. Um, I mean, this is literature that I read in the 8th grade and you know 9th grade, and I was in the classes that were aiming at saying the class to college. This
Yeah.
is college prep classes, and we're reading To Kill a Mockingbird and Gatsby and all this stuff. I don't think they had college prep classes back when this book was published. This was a guy who, was farmers. He worked in a mill. I mean, his parents did something like that,
Yeah.
and he was being asked to read and discuss, part of a chapter of George Eliot. So no, it's definitely fallen now, which is really too damn bad. It
Yeah. I
really is.
remember came across a
I'm sorry, you
collection
dropped
of
out for a second
sorry,
again. Bessie.
no problem. Back in
Yep.
high school, I came across my first sample of this stuff. It was a translated to French collection of, Lovecraft pastiche. That was my
Okay,
first
sure.
encounter with Clark Ashton Smith with Return
Oh
of the
wow.
Sorcerer. It's the one
Oh
where,
God.
a guy gets hired to translate the Necronomicon for a guy, an old man who he discovers is a sorcerer who killed his twin brother, chopped him to pieces, and
Yes.
stuck him in the walls. But he keeps coming back and
Under the
scraping at the
covers, and it's
doors.
like, yeah, oh, it's
Yeah,
so
yeah,
cool.
yeah. And eventually,
Right,
he's all
right.
verdigris, and literally verdigris is a word I learned from Clark Ashton Smith.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah, it's classic stuff, and
exactly.
that's not even one of his most highfalutin vocabulary stories either. That
Oh,
one's pretty
not at
simple.
all. No,
Yeah.
but and you think about this guy in a cabin in California, 100 more years ago,
Hmm.
teaching himself,
Yeah.
from addiction. Of course, I mean, Christ knows what his IQ was, but I mean, in the education system back then, I mean, for whatever good it was. But I mean, the guy teaching, it's like Abraham Lincoln. I mean, it's the guy teaching himself. Plus, he taught himself, it appears to me, serviceable French and serviceable Spanish. You
Yeah.
could probably judge his French if you ever came across him.
Yeah. And taught himself to
But
sculpt, to do to write poetry, and to
so, man, I mean, it's
autodidact.
oh no, I mean it's incredible. I know. I don't know if you ever met Donald Sidney Fryer, the poet. I mean, he's done a lot of biography of Clark Ashton Smith and all this. And he came out one year. We have here just south of us, where we're in the northwest suburbs outside Chicago, and you go south of here into Lombard, Illinois. And every year they have the Windy City Pulp and Paper Con. So I've been going there for years, and it's a bunch of old guys in ponytails buying old pulp magazines, the paperbacks and stuff. It's wonderful. So Don came out one year for whatever reason, like to buy stuff, I suppose, or whatever, and then he miscalculated his trip or whatnot. So he had 3 days to kill, I think. So it's like, all right, come stay by us. You can that time you can sleep in the upstairs room. I'll sleep on the couch, whatever. We made room for him and he stayed here. We had, we met the family and all this stuff. But he knew Clark Ashton Smith. You probably know this story. I mean, when he got out of the army in California, I mean, he made it a point to go meet Clark Ashton Smith and talk with him and stuff.
Good man.
Quite remarkable. He was just as remarkable then, older back then he was, as he was then when he was a young man. I mean, the guy was incredible.
Yeah. And he wrote incredibly. I think your sword and sorcery writing, I can see it. Definitely, you're kind of like for at least from my opinion, kind of like at
Yeah,
the midway point between Clark Ashton Smith and Robert E. Howard. You have the blood and thunder, but there's also that darkness and sorcery and stuff like that that comes in from
yeah.
both poles in that particular field.
I don't know why I do such dark stuff, but I do. Um,
Hey, I ain't
Howard
complaining.
Andrew, yeah, right. I mean, Howard Andrew Jones, whom I like. I mean, he's a good editor, he's a good writer, but he turned down one of my stories one time. He said it's just too dark. I mean, we shoot for another audience. Like, oh, okay, I understand.
Well, the interesting thing though is that I wouldn't characterize your work as grimdark. Like if
See,
we're
I
going
don't
like in
know.
genres and stuff like that, your stuff is still heroic enough to I think to fall under the heroic fantasy sword and sorcery kind
Okay,
of demarcation without it. It's like, yeah, there's really dark stuff in here. I mean, you have
yeah, yeah,
entire stories of like well, pretty nightmarish shit happening, but
yeah.
it's not like look at how gross and edgy we are, which is often my criticism of the whole grimdark thing.
See, that's what. See, I guess I've never read any grimdark that like because if it's just beating that one note over and over and over again, then that's not good. You got to strike a back. You got to bounce between two poles or something. Otherwise, you don't have much of a story. That's my take.
Yeah, like this story here in your collection, Tales of Attluma,
Yeah,
Attluma being
yeah.
the setting that you create for many of
Big
these.
fun. Yeah,
The generosity of the gods is funny as hell.
that was an early one.
Yeah. Well, yeah, this one contains stories from all throughout your career. I mean, let's see if I can see when
I
that
the
particular
one
story
thing
was
I didn't
written.
do, the one thing I didn't do with that, and I should have, is I should have put notes in the back, it's telling you when the stories first were published and appeared, and so you'd have a sense of them. Everything okay? Is something wrong?
No, no, I'm just
Still there?
looking at see if I can actually find when it was written, but okay, I don't have that up right here.
I can tell you. Yeah. Yeah. I should. I've got a blog that I never go on to. I should put this thing on a blog. because a couple of them I totally rewrote. The interesting thing about Generosity of the Gods, I don't know if I changed 3 words in that thing. When I first wrote it, and this is back in 71, 72, and I sent it to Gordon Linsner, and he said, "You sent me another nice story. I mean, I'll publish it." And I wrote some more stories, and I must have felt I was going in a certain direction, because I wrote to him and I said, "I just reread Generosity of the Gods. I'm no longer satisfied with it. Would you mind not publishing?" And he said, "Well, I never heard that from an author." But he didn't. And so it just sat there for years. Years go by. I read this thing, and it's sparkling. Okay, it's like, what the hell was my problem? You know, I mean, it's perfectly fine story. You know, it's an early one. I mean, I was all over the place trying different weirdo things. You know, skull that comes back and grants wishes.
Yeah.
You know, people in the cave where the blob lives, stuff like that. You know,
Yeah, the first one, Discal's Skull, 1973. That one was.
Yeah. That one, best story of the issue in a Space and Time magazine. And so I won the winner's check. Excuse me, this son's. I got $5 for that story.
Oof.
First money I ever earned writing stories.
Okay, well, at least you earned some money on that. I know some people who write stories and don't make anything on it.
Excuse me again, this sign.
Yeah. Then again, I also know people who's you pay not to write stories sometimes, but
There you go. But no, that's the darkness of where the stories come from and how I got started. The really funny is this will clear out. I remember being young, I don't know, 10, 11, and I could stay up to 9 o'clock and watch TV with my parents. Okay, so and they're watching some TV show. These things were all half hours back then. And so here we are. They break for a commercial. We got 5-10 minutes to go. And my father says to me, "Do you want me to tell you who the killer is or who did it?" And I said, "How are you going to know that?" He said, "See if I'm right." So he told me. Because it's all Pulp Fiction. I mean, it's all like by number, you know.
Yeah, there's a formula involved.
It's all formula. And sure enough, he was right. You know, how'd you know that? How'd you know that? He just kind of shrugged, like he was some mastermind, to figure this stuff out. And I never forgot that. It was really intriguing. It told me something about stories, in a crude way, how you put stories and characters together. And so then years go by, and they had great drug stores down here at one time. And in Liberty Township, I would stay at my grandma's house, my grandparents' house, my dad's parents, like for a week in the summer, because she could get in KDKA in Pittsburgh. We couldn't at our house. So I could stay up and watch the monster movies on Saturday night with my grandmother, who loved this stuff, this old gothic Scottish woman, and so I'd stay there for a weekend and watch the movies. But I could walk to the Liberty Plaza, apartment stores, auto stores, all this stuff. And so I'd be in the great drugstore looking at, the mid list. What's called, it was called the mid list. All these paperbacks, everything from cartoons, you know what I mean, cartoons and mystery collections and all that stuff. And I'm buying stuff. I mean, that's where I bought Golden Blood, paperback, Conan.
I have that one.
Golden Blood?
Yeah. I have it on my
here. Do you have the old Lancer paperback? It doesn't matter what edition it is. I got the old Lancer, one of the old Lancer paperbacks.
Let me see. I'm gonna go check.
Yeah, it was in.
All right, let's see.
It was serialized in Weird Tales. I think was it? That was Jack Williamson. That wasn't Ed Price. That was Jack Williamson. Wrote that.
Where did I put that thing?
Yeah, well, you're in a place where technology feels
somewhere.
like science. That's okay. Yeah, where technology feels like science.
Yeah.
That was in Weird Tales.
Where did I put it?
It's there.
The perfect moment, and I can't remember where I bloody well put it.
That's okay. That's okay.
Okay. Give up. Jack Williamson, Golden Blood.
There it is.
There we go.
There it is.
Oh yeah.
Oh, I think that's an earlier edition than mine, I think. Yeah.
Okay, say that again. I
Because
didn't
they
hear because I didn't have my
rebooted it in
headphones on.
paperback. That's Lancer, right?
Let's see.
It's
Lancer
about the
Books,
little,
yes.
yeah, Lancer books. Yeah, he
1930,
became he
copyright
became
1933. First
yeah.
Lancer
It was
edition
a Weird
published July
Tales.
1964.
Yep, it was a Weird Tales. Um,
Nice. I love this. Is like woman with snake, warrior about to attack, vision of
yep.
woman with snake, skulls on sticks, and a tank. What more do
The,
you want? You know?
that's it. No, I picked it up immediately. And the hero's name is Price Duran, correct?
Yeah, Price Stern,
Because
Soldier of Fortune.
Soldier of Fortune, because
Yeah,
Jack Williamson named him after E. Hoffman Price. Because these are all,
nice.
they all knew each other. That's how it's
Uh,
done.
this
So
era
it's
of literature, this Abraham Merritt is a personal favorite of
E.
mine. Ever
Merritt. Yep.
since, yeah, that guy's, I've got a bunch of his stuff too.
Oh, I do too. Yeah.
Yeah. Plus, that recurring character of the person post-war who's just, fought for in whatever war, was the one at the time, usually World War
Yep.
II or something like, Korean
Right.
War or something like that, who's now just like not necessarily down on his luck, but looking for the next adventure. And then the
Exactly.
story falls in their lap, and they get like there's often like when they'll answer a want ad in a newspaper. It's like
Exactly.
wanted adventurer, someone who's not afraid of death and maiming, in search of golden
Exactly.
glory. It's just like it's just
I wouldn't be surprised if they had ads like that back then. I mean,
yeah,
just really incredible. Um, Conan. Um, in the if you look at the old Weird Tales, they put a little blurb, in the table of content, a little blurb there,
mm,
or a little blurb that goes with the illustration on the title page. Conan is described as a soldier of fortune, sometimes as a barbarian.
yeah,
It's exactly what he is,
a mercenary half the time.
mercenary,
Yeah,
exactly. So I mean, which is exactly the kind of stuff that Howard, you know, liked and in his dreams wanted to be if he could have left home,
mm,
and his health had been okay. Um, and that's why he gave us what he gave us, thank goodness. So
yeah. I mean, that's the perfect kind of character for an action story. If you want that character to be able to do a whole bunch of different things, you don't want him
yeah,
in a established military hierarchy and he stays there and stuff like that. That can
right,
work, but you're always going to be somewhat limited in terms of like where he can go because he's got orders to follow and stuff like that. Whereas someone who can just like, okay, I'm working for this country today, for this country next, this other country next time, and this time I'm just going to be doing some shit on my own for the fun. I
okay.
heard there's a treasure somewhere here.
Now, if you fold that into sword and sorcery, that's that any kind of adventure story. Anyway, that's where they all come together in this Venn diagram with private detective stories and westerns
Yeah, and horror,
because
of course, too,
and I'm sorry,
and horror as well. There's a
horror is in there as
big,
well.
big vein of both gothic and the more contemporary of
Oh
the
yeah,
time cosmic horror. Just worming
oh
their
yeah.
way into all that stuff.
What I'm thinking of here is um, you have the saddle tramp, or you have the guy in the western who's down on his luck. Maybe he's going to come into town and play Pharaoh, at the gaming table, or he's the detective, who just drinks a shot of whiskey and lights a camel, and takes the job that comes in with the sultry dame, um, so that they're outsiders. They're kind of attached to the social order, or the military, unit or something like that. But they're free enough that they can follow their own path, do that stuff, and that's what we wanted to do, you know.
Yeah,
And if they have a friend who is associated with, the public order, the public good, then they're a buddy, who's like, you can put up with that stuff, but I can't. That's why I don't carry a badge. Or that's why I'm a PI. And it's like there's something so deep in us that wants it. To me, it's Achilles. I love Homer. I love the Iliad.
oh yeah,
And one of the books I read, a number of books about the Iliad, but one of them makes the point that of those kings, of those heroes that go on the ships to go to Ilium, to go to Troy to fight, they're all city men. they have cities to run. They're kings. They have this stuff.
Yeah.
Achilles has hints that he comes from like Asia, maybe like the Scythian background or something like that. Because he doesn't answer to city stuff. He wants nothing to do with the cities. He wants to destroy cities. That's why he's head of the Myrmidons, and
Yeah.
stuff. That's Conan. That's the saddle tramp. That's the detective. And there's something very, very deep in us. It's very masculine, which doesn't mean it's just men, but
Yeah.
it
Well, there's
goes to that.
masculine traits in women too. I mean, it's not.
That's what I mean. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's not just men. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But then that takes us to who was it? Sarah Paretsky. She's here in Chicago. Who wrote? She had a hell of a time convincing publishers. Here's this misogyny. Here's this old style called publishing. The same editors that edited in the 30s and 40s were editing paperbacks and stuff in the 50s and 60s and 70s. And she had a hell of a time getting, her first novel with a female PI into print. Oh, girls can't be PI. It's like, please, right? It's like, I mean, this is so novel and so interesting. Why not? There's a good story there, But they're thinking conventionally because I guess that's what they're paid to do,
Yeah.
So
Or it's like, we are doing good with this particular way of doing things. We're just going to stick with what we know works. So we're not going to, change instead of just like, not keep what works, but also try out something like that. You don't necessarily have to, throw all your marketing budget at it, but, try it out, see if it gets a good response, and then you can expand from there.
Give it a try. There's this story that Robert Bloch. I mean, the depression. He got out of college, and here is the depression. And he was trying stuff for a job. I think it was in advertising or promotion, and he interviewed for the job. And it's like, yeah. And he said, "Let me work for you for free for a month. If I haven't got what it takes, I'll just go my own way."
Mhm.
And I thought, boy, that's really ballsy,
That
But
takes confidence for sure.
it sure takes confidence. I remember telling Kirby McCauley that he was my agent at the time. Very soon he was Stephen King's agent, and we know what happened there.
Mhm.
But he was trying to sell Oron when it was a manuscript, And I said, would it help to give him the manuscript for free? I'll just send me what the royalties are. He said, no, nobody does that. We're not doing that. Well, he wouldn't have gotten his commission,
There you go. Yeah.
But, but it's kind of like, what's to lose? You put a guy in print, he's written in a genre that's already going to sell, so maybe he gets, one royalty check for $50 or something, and then the thing dies. I mean, why not take a chance? And that's asking a lot of people. Well, there's a line about you don't ask a man to do something that goes against the way he makes a living. And so there's that. I mean, it's like trying to sell an idea in Hollywood. Oh God, try
Yeah. Which you
something
have
original
experienced as
there.
well. You've written screenplays as well, plays.
Have you see?
Mhm.
I wrote one with my friend Joe Bonadonna. A couple of horror novels that I wrote, and
Mhm.
he said I really like the characters in this one. The sequel, the ending is powerful. So he mushed them together. We went back and forth, with drafts, until we got the movie that we wanted. It's about modern day sorcerers, it's about magicians, and it got good coverage, as they say. And the readers liked it, but that's as far as it got, you know. And as somebody told me, you got to have a phone number in Beverly Hills, at least in America, if you're going to try to get feature films. So
It's
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
it's not what you do; it's who you know.
Always,
Mm.
always, and that's a lesson that, see, growing up in Liberty Township, mailing stuff in from Girard, Ohio, took me forever to learn. Oh, I can do this. I mean, um, you have to cultivate people who are on your side, and who like what you're doing, and who have a vested interest in it.
Yeah.
Um, when I finally met John Douglas, he bought the first book of that series, Magician. He bought it, and uh, he liked it. But that was for Avon Books, and little did I know behind the scenes they were going to get. They tried doing some horror stories, then they decided we're getting out of that. We're going back to romance. You know, Avon's always said romance. So he went to bat for me and got the second one bought. And so I decided I'd like to go to New York, meet my new agent, you know, who was Don Moz. He's done very well for himself since. And maybe meet John Douglas. I mean, he's a legend, you know. So it was published as The Fair Rules of Evil. It's hard to find.
Yeah, Avon Books, 1989.
Yeah, oh, you have it?
Well,
oh,
no, I just have.
You looked it up. Yeah, look it up
Yeah,
online.
my research
that's
is thorough.
Yeah, do that. No, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
So this was the sequel to it, The Eyes of Night, and I said, you know what happened with the first one? You know, and he really wasn't giving me a good answer. So you know, clearly he knew something I didn't, you know, and so I went back home, and that one gets published, and I'm trying to contact local bookstores. Let me, I'll come in, order 25 copies, I'll sign them. We can't find it on our website. It's not in our warehouse, you know. So what I came to find out is that it wasn't being pushed to the sales guys.
Ooh.
The sales team wasn't told to promote this book. So it made it in those long boxes to go to the distributors, which is how, this is an amusing story, which is how I found the first book, The Fair Rules of Evil, in a porno bookstore. When I lived in Akron, that book came out when I was living in Akron. And there was this bit, took up this whole corner of this block. And you go in, and it had newspapers from out of town, you know, every magazine you'd ever want, you know, all this stuff, all the newspapers from out of town, and the spin racks, you know, with the paperbacks. Everything was a pocketbook back then.
Yeah,
and then go over here. Yeah, here's the counter. And then they have, you know, these bat wing doors like in a saloon. And you go back, and that's where the porno and these big VHS boxes, you know, and the magazines and all this stuff. And the guy who worked them most of the time, we got along really, really well. He was one bright guy. He got the New Yorker. So I didn't have to buy the New Yorker. If he got anything good to New York, he'd say, here, this is a good article. This is a good story. You know. So he's very kind to me. He was very good to me, you know. But I walk in one day, and I'm looking at the paperbacks, you know, and there's my book. And I'm like, did you know my book is here? He goes, in this place? And I said, yeah, it's here. And they had 3 or 4. So whoever the distributor was free to put them wherever the hell you could find, you know, space on a rack, you know. I found it in a grocery store too one time. You know, they had a lot more paperback.
Oh man.
You know, racks back then did not. So what I learned from that is
you have to remember, like, well, at least my stuff's getting out there.
Yeah, you know, it's like look in the porno bookstores first. That's what I learned. Yeah. You got to have an agent who really loves your work and goes to bat for you, because she's a salesperson, you know. So they're gonna try to make money off us. You need that. You need an editor who really loves your stuff, because if at some point you can find a home with one publisher, whether it's paperback originals, you know, in the mid list, or whether it's hardcover with one of the 5 now, I guess. It's good to have an editor, you know, who appreciates what you're doing and is on your side. And then the one that I never thought about before the experience at Avon, you got to have a sales staff. You got to have salespeople, you know, who the fire is lit under them by the editor and the Monday morning, the folks at the Monday morning meeting. And you need to have all that. You know, you really do. I mean, one of the reasons why Stephen King became so huge, and that's a story in itself. I mean, that's just a miracle.
Yeah.
You know, he knows that. But the famous Bill Thompson at Doubleday, when he bought Carrie, it was basically a novella. He said, you got to beef it up with something. So that's where we get the newspaper clippings and all that. If you ever read the novel, you know.
Yeah.
And
the kind of epistolary sections.
Very much so. Exactly. So he told King, you know, okay, now it's thick enough to make a hardcover book out of. We're going to put it in our fall catalog. You never put stories like that in the fall catalog. Fall is for serious stuff, you know, and bestsellers. You know, best-selling authors. but he put it in there, and so that led to the galleys, because they still had galleys in those days, being sent to Hollywood, which is how Brian De Palma or his agent read it, and he'd only made Sisters at that time, which I saw the drive-in, and he said, "I want to make a movie out of this," which ended up, having Sissy Spacek, young John Travolta, who was the other. I mean, it's like it was a perfect storm of young talent coming together and just knocking it out of the park.
Yeah.
It was just incredible, just incredible.
I think it comes
So,
down to a combination of finding opportunities like that, having the people or surrounding you. Now, my turn to start coughing. Finding the people surrounding you to take advantage of those opportunities, but also having something worth having. You have to have that initial nucleus of talent and creativity and good work to attract the people who will go to bat for you, who will help pull in those opportunities in order to expand on,
right.
and go from there. Basically, it's like the old saying, amateurs study tactics, professionals study logistics. You need a sales logistics in order to get that tactics, in this case being, your own talent as a writer and stuff like that. You need to get, in order to get that.
That puts it excellently well. Yeah, that puts it precisely well. That's what it is. And I knew none of that, when I was, 19, 18, 19, 20,
How
literally
could
in my
you?
parents' basement. What's that?
How could you know any of that?
You couldn't. You couldn't.
Yeah.
And I'm literally in my parents' basement typing. At first on the portable Smith Corona I took to college. And later on I went with the old farmer, the guy who lived next door, Mr. Reynolds. He was the best cusser I ever knew. He could swear it was an art form for him. He was incredible, And he had a cat named Esau, which I loved. I mean, best name ever.
That's a great name.
For the Old Testament, And but he used to go to country auctions. His wife died. For his entertainment was going to country auctions. And I found, I still have it, Smith Corona typewriter. My guess is about 1925. From just doing a little research. Weighs a ton. And it's, you have, it's huge. And the only thing wrong with it is somehow in one little part of the leg, the foot of the A, capital A letter, a little bit got knocked out. So, it's like, it's a detective story. If you could see, if you knew this letter came from that typewriter, you got the guy.
EBLID, the killer, yeah.
Yeah,
this man was bludgeoned to death with a typewriter with a slightly misaligned capital A.
Exactly. But I thought that was just grand, man. I mean, I typed on that thing. I mean, and I got muscles like Hercules that you really had to push down on the skis, And so I typed on that thing for many, many years, and I felt like a pulp writer, writing on an old pulp writer's typewriter,
I mean, it's got that aesthetic, right?
Exactly. It wasn't even Remington Rand. Was it Rand? It was Remington typewriter. Yeah. So,
the Thompson typewriter is something else.
What's that?
The Thompson typewriter is something else entirely.
Exactly. Oh, they did call the typewriter. Technically. Yeah, you're right. But it's like, I was in heaven writing these stories and apparently doing a pretty good job of it. The first stuff I said out was getting published, in the fanzines, which was a world unto itself, Over here is the 1930s with great stuff. I've said the 1970s was our 1930s, You had all these young writers writing for the fanzines, and it was no holds barred, and we were just, cranking stuff out, Gordon Linsder was it. I mean, Jessica Salmonson then, Dave Madison in Texas. These are just names. Daryl Schweitzer, I mean, just go back and if you ever see a copy of the little fanzines, 8.5 by 11. I mean, this is where the talent came from. And a lot of us then graduated to writing paperbacks, and writing other stuff. I mean, that's what we had to do then,
Yeah, and it also fomented a lot of collaborations too. You did not only obviously the Red Sonja novels with Richard L. Tierney, you also did for the Witch of the Mists, which was that was a Brand McMorn pastiche.
Brand McMorn, yeah. Nick and I wrote that.
And after that, Witch of the Indies, which was Blackville May, another Robert E. Howard character. That one's more of a pirate kind of guy. When you're doing something like that,
Say, go ahead.
Yeah. When you're doing something like that, which is based in a pre-existing character, pre-existing world, how much of your own writing style do you then alter to match up with the original author? Like, obviously, you're trying to keep the characters fairly, similar because, obviously it's, pre-existing character. But how much
Yeah,
of the original author's writing style do you end up trying to emulate when you're creating something like that pastiche?
not much when I was doing it. And I don't think Dick ever did either. So in to that extent, it's not truly a prestige.
Mm.
And someone pointed that out. Scott Oden, I think, was online on Facebook one time, and he said, a lot of these really aren't pastiches. They're not trying to write like Robert E. Howard. They're fan fiction, you know. So that's basically what we were doing. We stuck with the character. We knew what kind of characters we had there.
Yeah.
But I kind of got away with it. I don't know how many people read the Black Balmy short stories. I did. Charles Saunders, I found out later, did. But I felt I'm just going to write the pirate story I always wanted to write. Because I love
Yeah,
pirate
there you
stories.
go.
So
I
I
mean,
did.
that's what Robert E. Howard did whenever he was
That's what
writing
Robert E.
like
Howard
a,
did.
yeah, Pool of the Black Ones or other stories like that. He was basically writing a story and putting Conan in it, and that's how he got
Exactly.
into Weird Tales.
That's exactly right. That's exactly what he
Yeah.
did. When it came to Grand McMorn, um, I'd read the short story. I really liked the short stories. I think Carl Wagner had written one that I'd read. The one with a bag of eyes in it, I think. Simon. Uh,
That sounds like a
so,
Carl Edward Wagner kind of story, yeah, right there.
yeah. Um, but I wrote. That's actually the first one that Roberta Grossman and Zebra asked me to write. Kirby had been flashing around the manuscript of Oron, and they weren't published. They were going to publish it, but they read it and they said the guy can write like Robbie Howard, or Robbie Howard stuff. So they said, Carl Wagner was going to write Queen of the Night, on again, off again, on again, off again. He didn't. So they hired me to write a Brand McMorn story. So I did the famous first chapter and synopsis for the rest of it, sent that in, and they said, okay, we like it, but now we want you to write pirate story. Because apparently it was on again that Carl was going to write, Queen of the Night. So Kirby sent me that big copy of the Don. Who was it? The publisher. Um, I think Don Grant. Don Grant. Copy of the Valmy stories. So I read that, and it's like I'm going to write my own pirate story. So I did, and they bought it, and there's an amusing story there. I'll have to tell you. And so that came out, and then by then they decided they wanted to do Graham McMorn after all. So Carl wasn't doing his version. So, but Kirby wanted it to be a collaboration between Dick Tierney, and I'd met Dick. It was through Dick. I met him at a MinCon, which is one of these conventions they had up in Twin Cities back in the mid-70s. And I'd read a story of his called The Winds of Czar, which is just great. It's just such a great. And so I gave him Oron to read. So we could read it. Yeah. And then it was like, would you mind if I show Oron to a friend of mine who just went to New York to be a literary agent? It's like, that pass. It's like, yes, please. So
Why not?
so that's how that kind of got started. So that's how Dick and I got to know each other and became fans of each other's work. To say. But where was I going with this? So collaborate with Dick. So that's what we did. So Dick said, and this is true of the Sonias as well. He said, I love to do research, and he did. He spent his whole life in a library. So it's like I could just sit down and start typing. I don't care. The cannon roared, and the dragons attacked and all this stuff. So I could just sit down and start doing that. So this will work fine. And so where they already had the opening chapter, so I just typed the rest of it, and realized I knew nothing about ancient Rome except what I'd seen in movies. because I think there's a ship and they're going to make these, it's going to be a slave, and it makes port at the port of Rome or something, I mean, something really, Dick Charity's like, no, 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 no. It has to go up the river, and it goes somewhere
Yeah.
else. And he knew Rome. He knew Rome.
Nice.
And clearly, from Simon of Guinness stories. So he saved my behind on that one. And put all the Roman stuff in it, which is so fascinating. But the one thing that he insisted on, because he's like 50, he was 15 years older than I. He said Dave's name should come first because he did the first draft. And Kirby's like, okay. Now that's really good of him. I had no name. He at least had a name, a lot of fans. So that was very good of him. And then when Kirby got the idea to do the Sonias from the comic books, because he would just come up with this stuff, and then he'd go to
and they're the naming convention remained.
That's it, man. That's it.
Yeah.
He said, let's do 4 Red Sonja novels. They tie in with the comics. Roy Thomas liked the idea. He was going to write introductions to them. And so when the contracts came, and he'd up to 6 novels. Good, and 50-50, Dick and I. And all I knew about Red Sonja was she'd appeared in a couple of the black and white Conan books, so I was living in Phoenix at the time with my first wife, and so I went to a comic book store and bought all the Red Sonja comics I could find and read them. And the only one that really threw me, there's one of them that's about a giant clan.
I know
it's like
that has become
really,
infamous. That panel. You're going to feed me to a clam? It's just like that. That's just,
it's like I
it's
really
like
don't
not
want
only
to
is she
get
worried about
into
being
that.
eaten, she's like, what the hell kind of situation is that? One thing about the Red Sonja comics from back then is that they were
Yeah.
always a lot. I think because they weren't,
Go ahead,
in the sense
you
they
dropped
would
out again. No, say it
sorry,
again. That they weren't.
in the sense that I think because they had the Conan the Barbarian stories and Sword, obviously, for the
Yeah.
more, we're keeping this straight, playing this straight.
Yeah,
With Red
yeah.
Sonja, she was just adjacent to that. Technically, she's not from the Hyborian Age at all. She's,
Right.
adapted from a historical story. But
Right.
they could go in places that are a bit weirder and more, funny, I guess, is the one way I would put it. Like, I
And
think there was one with bee people and stuff like that. They just go in
yeah.
directions. Yeah.
I mean, he pushed it. It was psychedelic. It was, this interesting stuff, But Dick and I always played it straight,
Mm-hmm. That's
straight
one thing
and
I've
narrow.
read described about to these stories, that the Sonya in this is very, it's a very grounded set of Sonya stories, if that makes any sense.
Boy, do I like that. And if that's true, I'm very proud of that. She's my character in the sense that I wrote the first drafts. I mean, she's Roy Thomas's character. But I mean, I had to set it up so that I had the first draft that Dick could work with, And we'd both written sword and sorcery stories. And I'd already written Oron. I'd already written the Shadow of Sorcery. They weren't print yet.
Yeah, which we get retailed as the
Grand
Sorcerer's Shadow. This is one of my favorites of yours.
The actual title is the Shadow of Sorcery.
Yeah.
So Roberta, or who was the editor there, Roy Torgerson, one of them changed. Roberta would always give my books. I don't know why these titles. Now here are 3 examples. Okay, when I signed the contract to do 3 new Orons, published Oron, Shadow Sorcery, and then my agent at the time had said, huge fantasy trilogies are selling. Why don't you outline one? Well, of course, I don't do anything halfway, apparently. So I did 50 pages, single space, of this gargantuan epic that had to do with Helen of Troy, the fall of capitalism, a Jesus Christ figure. I mean, it's fall of the first world, okay?
Yeah, the fall of the First World trilogy.
That's one of the best things I've ever written. And it's huge. And I don't blame people for not wanting to read it. I mean, these books are like 15, 16 books a piece, If you read the old paperbacks, they're basically the same. I added a new scene in the 3rd book later on and stuff. But I mean, it's good work, I mean, it really is. But it's not what we've come to think of as a conventional fantasy trilogy, which is quasi-medieval, Game of Thrones, princes and princesses. There's always going to be dragons. I hate dragons. There's going to be a dragon in there. They're a crutch. God damn it. Um, Gandalf figures or some,
Yeah.
and it's like, and that's what sells now. That has now coalesced into the same kind of thing, amorphous thing that the barbarians used to be in the 70s. A guy in a loincloth with a naked babe and a monster on the cover. It's this amorphous thing.
Wonderful
And
days.
that's what they are now. Yeah. And I'd love to see somebody challenge that, but I mean, who would? They get money doing this, So this is before that coalesced, and all we had back then was Tolkien's Sword of Shannara. There was another one. There was Sword of Shannara. There was the guy that my friend Joe loves this series. The guy who's a real misanthrope and goes to another dimension. I'll think of it. Terry Brooks was not Terry Brooks. I'll think.
Gene
But
Wolfe, or
those things, they were starting to coalesce.
was it the Shadow of the Torturer and the Mazalan?
What's that?
Was it Shadow of the Torturer, that story, or am I thinking a different one?
No, it's not the one I remember. The guy's a leper or something. And then he goes, I don't. But they all kind of followed that methodology, and it really worked well. I mean, Ian Valentine loved that, that stuff, and these other publishers got into it, and at the same time, juvenile stories, what we now call YA, with young women as protagonists. Cinderella. They don't know they're a princess, but by the end of the 3 books,
Yeah.
So those were done, on and ad nauseum, I suppose, on and on and on and on. And this was the marketplace, So by the time I got my outline done for the Fall of the First World, all the trilogies had been bought. I must say, to her credit, Irene Goodman, I was with Goodman Agency then. She did keep going after this thing. Finally sold it to Pinnacle, which they were another publisher, kind of like bottom of the rung publisher, like Zebra was and stuff. They were a publisher.
Yeah.
So the guy who bought it, I still remember his name. He had 3 names: Charles Rue Woods. And when I talked to him on the phone, he sounded like, a very polished, well-educated man of letters who worked in the publishing world.
Mm.
And because God hated him for something for a little while, he ended up in Pinnacle. Poor man, but he did okay. I mean, he moved on shortly after my first book, and so then I got I got another editor for the second book, and then by the time they published the 3rd book, nobody cared anymore. They had a new editor, and I remember talking to him, and he's like, "Well, what do you think about a cover? What do you think about this or that?" So I was like dictating ideas. So that's where you get the Rasputin type character with this. You always, so or I'm sorry, the Babylonian city in the background with crashing waves and a little boat.
Yeah, it's something that gives that real fall of the world. The world is ending kind of feel to it. Things are crumbling.
So if you ever dare to read it, it's a third of a million words. It reads clear. I mean, it reads cleanly. I mean, it's fast. It's good. It's a fast read. It's a good read.
Yeah.
But I'm very, very proud of it. It's the closest I've come to anything literary, except for maybe Sometime Lofty Towers. So in other words, I conscientiously called upon my English major background and did the best work that I could to develop themes, to develop characters, to have all of this stuff happen. And certainly in Fall of the First World, it's basically a 19th century novel with a couple of raw sex scenes in it, but otherwise it's it's what it is. It's pretty landscape.
I mean, that fits in, I think, with the style of the '80s, especially for fantasy. There was a lot of that going on. I've got a couple of books from that period. It's like, this should have ended up in the porn section.
there was a lot of that. Yeah, there
Mm.
was a lot of it,
People were pushing
and
boundaries quite a bit.
pushing boundaries. Well, which brings us to the you know the collection that we're talking about here. You know the
Yeah, the one that your like some works. I mean, it's
yeah, the one
beating
that
hearts and
Oliver's
battle axes
yeah, the one that
campaign for
Oliver's
a
publishing.
yeah the spicy romantic sword and sorcery anthology.
He asked me to write a story for it, and it's like okay. And so I look, I looked at what the editor wanted. She sent out this information, and that in itself was kind of funny because I don't read romance. I mean, I don't mind. I mean, I know women who read romance.
Well,
But
you say
boy,
that,
is
but
that genre.
going over your works, though, I'd say there's quite a bit of it in here. I mean, Oron centers quite a bit among about a romantic relationship between
Yep,
Oron and his, paramour. What's her name?
yep,
I always keep forgetting. Desdira. I mean, the whole tragedy that
yep,
goes on with that. You have
yep,
Shadow the Sorcerer, which is
yep,
Akram and Nidis, the sorceress and the warrior, and all the
yep,
chaos that gets involved from their relationship.
yep.
So there's a lot. Obviously, Sonia was kind of wants to have a relationship, but can't really because of that oath and stuff like
She
that. And
almost did, yeah, but we
yeah,
weren't allowed to by contract. In the other, what I call the three new Oron books, what Roberta called Mosutha's Magic. Yeah, my title was Rain Sorcery with a comma and an exclamation point,
yeah.
which I like much better.
It does have a
Um,
certain kind of. It's got a bit of an Abraham Merritt kind of figure.
exactly.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
creep shadows and stuff like that.
exactly. It's that. What is it? Vocative case, whatever it is. The
Mm.
second one, I was gonna. She called uh,
The Valley of
Valley of
Ogram.
Ogram.
Yeah,
Valley of Ogram, and my title was one word, Death Wolf,
yeah.
because Oron the wolf, as he's known, comes across a real werewolf. Okay, the last one was a collection of short stories,
Hmm.
um, which Roberta called the Ghost Army,
Yeah. Original
and that
title:
is one.
Death,
What's that? Say it again.
Death in Asakad and Other Stories. The original
And other
title.
stories, exactly. Which tells you that it's a short story collection, and it gives you the
Yeah.
title of the first one.
Whereas if you
Uh,
start breaking out the Ghost Army, ooh, the new novel with Oron, oh, it's a bunch of short stories. And it's like,
yeah,
you
damn it,
need to
math.
actually advertise your book as what it is, or you're going to disappoint people.
My help would disappoint people and tick them off. I used to like Dave Smith, but the hell with this.
Rubbish.
Yeah, exactly. Short stories, him. Yeah.
I'm
So
here for the beating heart of novelization.
exactly. But when Oliver, emailed and said, "Here's what we're looking at for this anthology," it's like I've kind of written stories like that. I mean, in the first of what I call the New Warons, he has a wife. It's a woman, who's his wife. And then later on, there's another woman, and they do it, in the first of those books. And it's like,
Yeah, I have it
kind of like,
bookmarked.
why wouldn't they? Yeah, I mean, human beings, barbarian human. Uh, so so the editor sent the list of the five flames. Sounds like an R&B group, that's not what she called it. That's what I call it. But there's an order of uh, what do we call explicitness, I guess. So the first flame is kind of like a Harlequin romance. The second flame is a little more. It's not passionate, but it's a
It's another
um,
level on the hot sauce tiers.
yeah. There's a little bit there, but it's still going through the
Yeah, you haven't
motions.
hit Ghost
And
Pepper yet.
yeah, exactly. It's a Hallmark Channel movie. Is what it
Oh
is.
God,
Which my sister adores. I mean, God bless her. Um,
some of them have good plots.
oh no, I fully understand.
They're
I mean,
heartwarming.
I tell my daughter, whatever you watch, whatever you read, look for what's going on. If there's a plot, follow the plot. See what the characters are about, because it will never go. You will always remember that, never going to use. And a romance plot is a romance plot. It works just fine. You can transpose it. You can use it. Exactly. This is what storytelling is about. So the third one, as I think of it, it's like where you can name body parts, and there's like heavy petting, or maybe there's a scene where they do it. Four Flames is kind of even hotter. Probably what appears in most romance novels now. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And
I
five
don't miss the
to me is
dust.
like porn.
Yeah.
Basically, which it's erotica. Excuse me.
Yeah.
Which
You're at
is
the level of, Cinemax, at least.
exactly. It's Cinemax.
I
So
remember. Those of you who
so
are still Zoomers in the audience won't understand this, but it used to be hard to watch porn. You had to actually go seek it out.
remember, I used to go to theater. You had to go to a movie theater. Now
Yeah, that's even
that's how
before
old
my
I am.
time.
Yeah,
I
no,
would
that's how
stay up
old
on
I am.
Friday nights for Saturday nights for what they
Yeah,
call Blue
exactly,
Nuit, and
exactly.
there was an entire
Um,
program on TQS, one of the stations called Blue Nuit, where they just put on the softcore porn movies in
there
French.
you go. No, this was hardcore porn, and what happened was that my friend Rick Orbitz, again, I don't know if he's listening to overhear this, but he had a buddy Eddie, who was Youngstown, Ohio, who worked at the Foster Arts Theater. Now, once upon a time, the Foster Arts Theater on Mahoning Avenue, not the best section of town, had played legitimate art films, Ingmar Bergman and Claude Chevreul and all, but times have changed, and so now they're showing John Holmes and Jamie Gillis or whatever. So we played Dracula in a movie which we saw there, which I thought was like it's like a whole movie, but every 10 minutes there's porn. I mean, it's kind of amazing. But if Eddie called, Rick and I were going to hang out, and go have a beer, and if Eddie called, he'd be like, the boss is not here this night. You want guys want to come by. So we go over and we watch a couple of porno movies and shoot the breeze with Eddie, and whatever. And so this was the golden age of porn, where they were emulating Hollywood movies. And it was like it was such a strange period. It was so interesting. Looking back, I mean, you don't think it was innocent, but in this weird way, innocence may not be the right word, but they were trying to emulate Hollywood. They were. I saw
They were
one.
they were reaching out for legitimacy in a way.
Yeah. It's like what was the movie that?
Behind the Green Door, that's the really famous one that got
Yeah, that one I didn't
mainstream
see.
appeal.
No, I'm thinking of the one that Paul Thomas Anderson made. Boogie Nights.
Boogie Nights, yeah.
Did you ever see Boogie Nights?
Yeah, I seen it a while ago.
I watched it and it's like me. I think it's a perfect script. I mean, everything's there, and they tie everything up. It was really incredible. Now, you might judge it differently, but that period, I mean, it captured it down to the point that everybody involved in making those porno feature length movies is stupid. They're all stupid, but their hearts are really in it. And it's like
oh, darn it, we're gonna make the best darn porno we can make. Ladies,
exactly,
drop your pants.
exactly, and we're going to succeed because we're not really brave.
I think that
I'm watching this thing and I'm coming to the end of it, and it's like, my God, that's the secret to this. I mean, it's so
sincerity is key. You can
exactly.
make anything work so long as you're
You're right.
sincere about it. And I think
That's
that's
right.
one of the things I appreciate, especially about your work about it too. There's no tongue-in-cheek kind of winking at the audience kind of stuff. I hate that when I'm trying to read good sword and sorcery. As soon as it's like, oh, look at this is stupid, we're doing it anyway, but we know it's stupid, so you don't have to worry about that. That level of ironic detachment. No. Bring me the heaving bosoms and the muscular thews and the black magic and just the bloodshed and the screwing and everything. As the sign says, everything that was cool when I was 12 is what is cool. War, Arnold, big boobs, metal, you name it.
Oh, I never heard that before. That's wonderful. That's so great.
That is the great meme right there. But yeah, I mean, obviously other people's idea of what is cool depends on what they saw when they were 12. But for me, I mean, I'm in my 40s right now. I don't look it, but I am in my 40s. But thank you. I'm well conserved. But yeah, I mean, the one thing I would pride myself on being is unapologetic about the things I like. And honestly, I expect that from the things I like too. I mean, there's nothing worse, I think, to people who make something and then have to apologize for it, or make disclaimers for stuff.
Yeah,
It's like,
yeah,
if you were feeling so bad about the subject matter of what you're making, why didn't you make something else that didn't make you feel bad?
right. Buddy of mine in Warren, Ohio, Mike James, who is a true artist. He actually has a piece in the Guggenheim, believe it or not. And
Nice.
before he became ill with Meniere's disease and then a stroke, he'd still be doing huge canvases, I'm sure. But he and I have had many, many interesting talks over the years. Um, we talked back and forth on audio tape. We did this for 20 years, and he did
Wow.
it with friends of his in Holland and all over the world. Um, but
So the
but one of the
ancestor
things
of what we're doing right now in many ways.
exactly. Um, and one of the things he felt strongly about, and I'm with him 100% on this, is excuse me, basically to avoid mid cult, which is the term that came up in the 50s or 60s. I mentioned it in the Howard biography because it's these levels, and so there's either high art that succeeds and is communicating on that level and using all the tools available to it. And if we aspire to that or understand where it's coming from, now we can appreciate it. You come down a notch, and you have who was it who wrote this stuff that aspires to be high art, but it's just embarrassing, you know. And so this is the stuff that um what would you write that if you have to apologize for doing
Hmm.
it. And then if you go level below that is the stuff that used to be dismissed as trash or pulp fiction or Roger Corman movies, or whatever. And as Mike says, the top and the bottom have more in common with each other than the stuff in
Yeah.
the middle. And it
They
does.
both speak to
And
something. Like, if the high art is seeking like to speak to our minds, the low art is seeking going straight for your guts. It's going for your emotional responses
exactly,
like that. Yeah. One is
exactly.
more like philosophy and a higher. Well, I
Right.
wouldn't say necessarily higher thought. It's a different kind of emotion in that regard.
It's
It's
a
the one
different
that's really,
kind.
yeah. It's one related to more like philosophy and concepts like
Right.
that. Whereas the other one is like visceral, animal kind of human experience like that. That is, they're both quite eternal in that regard in many
They really
cases.
are. The thing that I told this to Mike, and what it seemed like to me was look at these Eastern European, go back a century, Eastern European composers. I love classical music.
Hmm.
And you look at something like the Dvorak or Smetana or these people, they took peasant songs and created orchestral masterpieces out of them. It's not one or the other; it's both.
Yeah.
And one speaks on one level to us, and the other speaks on another level to us. It's a little more abstract. Maybe you have to learn a little more about that field or that discipline to appreciate what this master was doing with it, or be a Dave Smith and just lie back and enjoy it.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean,
but they're
going
both
back to
legitimate.
yeah, going back to Howard for a second, many of his best stories are on both those levels. Sword and
They are
sorcery often has. I mean, you have the whole barbarism versus civilization kind of level, philosophical
right,
ruminations on the nature of nature of civilization and savagery and how those two interrelate, how the
exactly.
the cycles of it that go on through history. And then you have Conan fighting off an army of Picts with a badass topless chick on his side with another sword chopping
Yep,
up people on the same time. It's something for everybody.
it is. And I mean, I say it's because of influence of his mother, who taught him civilization. Um, Poetry. He was a natural born poet, and
Mhm.
thank God for that. I mean, the guy. I mean, who among us was born at that level of
Yeah.
understanding of lyricism and so on. Um, but if you do a close reading of his best stories, and we each have our own list of those, but if you do, in fact, I was doing a close reading of Black Colossus
Oh,
earlier
that's a
today.
good one. Most
Yeah,
metal
because
ending of all time.
yeah, talk about that. This is for my book that I'm writing about sword and sorcery.
Ooh,
I can
nice.
tell you about that. But you do a close reading, and holy crap, the quality of the writing, how it's put together. I mean, just the way it moves. I mean, this is good writing. This is really, really good
Oh
writing.
yeah.
Okay,
There's a
this
reason
is
it's taught
this.
us to the test of time.
Yeah, this is George Eliot level stuff. I mean, it really is. Um, Not every story. Maybe
Yeah.
George Eliot had, could just sit and take her time to write. Howard was on self-imposed deadlines. You get cranked up, have a beer, start typing, and always and all,
Yeah, he was
um,
putting paper ink to paper to pay the bills right there. He had expenses
well,
he had to deal
exactly,
with.
exactly. And to dismiss that kind of stuff as false. First of all, anyone who says that, you don't know Paul. Go
Oh no.
back, go back and read some of this stuff,
Yeah, some of the most
for Christ's
successful
sake.
literary works of all time are pulp fiction.
Exactly.
Like I've got a couple of the Shadow collection that
Mhm.
paperback collect editions of those, and
Yep.
that guy was bigger than Batman in his day.
Oh, it was huge. I'm looking over here because I thought, boy, if I could find that book, I'm going back to the best O. Henry short stories in 1932 and the 1933 edition. But you look in the stories in the back, and I mean, they there's stories from Weird Tales because
Yeah,
Farnsworth Wright was not an idiot. He knew good writing was something to publish it. Even if it's a weird story or a ghost story. There, adventure magazine, a lot of stories from adventure, make the cut into those lists, and were included or were like first or second, choice, or first or second runner up. Um, a lot of those faults. Blue Book, of course, obviously, is included in those. This is before the time of, thrilling detective mystery with the guys with the tongs, gonna, kill a woman. They probably wouldn't have included any of those, but they're pulp magazines, and they were taken off the rack. The adventure was, the Western book was, Weird Tales was, right along with Collier's or Harper's, or what was the
sometimes by
one
the
that
same
Mencken?
people.
Read by the same people.
Yeah,
Read by the same people. There's a great anecdote I read somewhere where somebody said that, I think it was Wild West Weekly, and that thing came out weekly. And I have a couple
yeah,
of copies. Oh yeah, it's good stories in it. And she said when that thing came in the mail, it was like Monday night or Friday night or whenever it was. So my dad went into his room, and nobody better bother him until he came out. He wouldn't even come out for supper. He was into this. And
yeah.
it's like that's what it was, for God's
Yeah,
sake.
and
Nobody
even
thinks
when
like it.
the
Well,
yeah, even and after the pulp era kind of came to an end, television picked up from there because what were some of the most popular TV shows in the early days? Westerns,
exactly.
yeah,
It was
adventure
all
serials,
it was all solid pulp writing, meaning that it followed those beats, it had those cast of characters, it delivered the goods.
yeah,
It was pulp paper, it was on radio. A lot of the same scripts
yeah,
on radio were just moved over to
and
TV. Lone Ranger
often for the
was,
same reasons
Gunsmoke
too, right?
was.
When you think
What's
about it,
that?
also yeah, also for similar reasons because you had that
Yeah,
limitations in terms of formatting, so you had to stick to a
right.
formula just to make everything fit properly. Same thing for short stories for these magazines. They had a
Sure.
set amount of space, set amount
Right.
of words that you could use for that stuff, and they had a set genre they were working in. I mean, the same skills would apply. If Howard had lived long enough to see that era, I would have loved to see the kind of stuff he would have come up with from that because he was moving
He would
into
have been great.
westerns quite a bit to the end of his life.
He'd have been a millionaire. Yeah, I mean, and he would have been in Hollywood or been adapted in Hollywood.
Yeah.
Absolutely, he would have. Pulling that trigger on that bullet, one of the worst moments in 20th century history. If you like popular fiction, as far as I'm concerned, God damn it, I'm sorry you did it.
Mm.
We all. But no, it was the same stuff. I mean, the first episode on radio of Gunsmoke was called Matt Gets It. Now this is the first adult Western on radio. And what they mean by it is that he's called out and he has to do the showdown with the guy, and Matt's the guy who gets shot. And so for the next 20 minutes, 25 minutes, whatever
You're
they,
just waiting for it to happen.
yeah, I mean, he's got to recuperate. and listen to Miss Kitty, you know, like probably upstairs in the saloon. Have Doc look after him and all this stuff. Now, what's he going to do? I mean, he's the marshal. Is he going to wuss out? Is he going to go back and face this guy again? I mean, what are we going to do? I mean, there's a great story by Richard Matheson that kind of follows the same idea. But he goes out and on radio, you know, I'm calling you out, Smith. Okay, you want to do this again? You know, boom, boom, and Matt kills him. So he was able to get up the stuff he needed. Gunsmoke goes to TV. First episode, Matt gets it.
There we go.
They just borrowed the script. They did it with the Lone Ranger. They used. When I was a kid, I loved stories of the Yukon. I don't know if you ever heard of these with what's Sergeant Preston of the Mounties with his dog King. And I found out later these are the same scripts they used for the Lone Ranger. They just put snow in them.
Oh, I mean, that's one way to cut costs.
Pay the writer. Yeah, they'd have to pay the writer, you know.
I mean, half the time they probably use the same sets too, if they could. Or I mean, they'd recycle everything they possibly could for these kinds of things.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's the fun of it. I mean, how many Star Trek episodes where they land on the planet? Are they, what is it, Griffith Park or whatever that place where they got the mountains? I mean, every blessed time.
Yeah, the same quarry.
Yeah, the same quarry where they're fighting Gorns or they're fighting, you know, whoever it is. It's wonderful. It's just wonderful.
And you know, Howard did this all the time. If a story didn't sell for whatever reason, he'd rewrite it, just change a couple of names, and submit it again until something stuck.
Always. Yeah. You know, because everybody was kind of in on it, and it wasn't deceptive. It was about getting the stuff done so people could enjoy, you know, what you were producing, you know.
Yeah, like, you know, Frost Giant's Daughter ended up getting published as Gods in the North with the different character names.
Exactly. What was it? Another point I was gonna make. I forgot it now. It doesn't matter. It's all getting old.
Aren't we all?
Oh God. I almost died last December. Did you hear that story yet from Oliver?
No, not yet.
No, really. I mean, it was amazing. Here, okay. This is not. You don't have to broadcast this, but this is another interesting story. I just happen to be in it. I want to talk about this too, about clonins and stuff. I got a million of them. No, this is back in 20. Let me think. No, not 20. Where are we at? 22, 23, 21. 21. Summer 21. COVID's going around. My family and I get it. My wife, my daughter, and I get it.
Mm-hmm.
So we all recuperate, we think, but I find that I'm short of breath after that. So that's typical. So this goes on for a couple of months. It's like, you know. So I go to the doctor, and he's like, "This sounds suspiciously like long COVID. You know, it should clear up in a couple of months." All right. Well, it doesn't. I go through the whole winter, and now it's springtime, and I'm having more difficulty breathing than I did last fall. This doesn't seem very good. So I go to see a pulmonologist, honest to God pulmonologist. I'm doing breathing tests and all this stuff. You have COPD. Well, I smoked for 20, 25 years from college on for the next couple of decades. And I quit. Like as of now, I quit like 26, 27 years ago, right? I mean, if I'm winded, it's because I'm out of shape. I'm an old guy. You know, there's no COPD. I mean, you see COPD. It's not COPD. I ain't got COPD. So I figure, because I used to work with doctors as a medical editor, this guy doesn't have the code he can bill for whatever it is the hell that I have, long COVID. So he's going to bill me for COPD. All right. So time goes, he gives me medication, I'm using it, and it's still getting worse. So I look up stuff online, and there's a rehab center around here, and they have a section that deals with people with long COVID. All right. Call them up, make an appointment. I go down there, and by this time, my wife and daughter are coming with me, and I'm walking deaf. I mean, I can take 3 or 4 steps. I got to stop it. 3 or 4 steps, stop it. It's horrible. I can't take a shower without sticking my head out because the steam, you know, suffocates.
Geez, that sounds
so
horrible.
This goes on. until last December. I can tell you exactly. It was December the 1st. I remember. It's Friday night, and I'm having, if I bend, I have trouble breathing. If I sit down, I have to count to 20 so I can take another breath. So this is really bad. So finally, I tell my wife, maybe I should go to the hospital. And she's like, "You think? We've been telling you for a year." Jesus. So, so they call the ambulance, and they come upstairs, and we're on the second floor. They come upstairs. They got me, take me in. So it's like 12:30 at night or whatever. I'm in there, and they get me off the gurney. They get me on a. So now I'm in the emergency, not the emergency. I'm in the area where they start tapping a vein, and I'm sitting there, and so I'm making jokes with the nurse and stuff. And so finally they get a room. So they kind of helped me get me on a gurney so I can go down the hall of this room. And I can barely get off the gurney. I mean, I sit up, I have to stop and breathe. Then they give me an oxygen. And it's like, okay, we're turning up the oxygen, but try to breathe through your nose instead of your mouth. That's where the oxygen. Dear God. So we finally get me in bed, and I'm just lying there. And if I lie there, I'm okay. I can breathe,
Yeah, it's when you start moving around that's when you have problems.
Right. So they've drawn some blood and they've tested it. They come in and said, "We're giving you a bag of blood. You're gonna liter of blood." Really? Okay. So that night they wake me up. We never sleep in the hospital. Another bag. So now it's Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon, and they got me in a catheter, one of those little things, and they're eating something. All that's on is old westerns. Me TV. I don't know if you have Me TV. It's they got all these westerns on Saturdays.
Probably one of the channels.
It's just you got it's just reruns. So I'm watching Metro, and so the doctors start coming, and the attending comes in, and he says, "I'm going to be kind of like shepherding all this stuff as it comes in," and pulmonologist comes in, and then the guy who's ended up being my hematologist. Because now, as I say, you're over 70, you find out about doctors you never knew existed. Well, now I have hematologists. I got one of these, collect the whole set. So he comes in, and he said, "We're going to give you some more blood, and we're going to start you on iron." Okay, he said your hemoglobin count was 3.7. Now I forget the unit of measurement, but if you're familiar with this, the bare minimum is like a 13 or 14, I mean, 12 to get you out of the hospital, right? It should.
My wife has had anemia problems, so yeah, that
there you go.
does.
Yeah, they were like, how were you walking? And it's like, I'm a tough Scotsman. I know. It's like, geez, I don't know. I don't know.
If you knew, you probably wouldn't have been able to do it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. They gave me 4 liters of blood, 3 of iron, just to get the hemoglobin up to where I could leave the hospital. Plus, they flushed out, I forget how many, I think 27 liters of fluid from my lungs and the rest of the body.
Oh man, no wonder you couldn't breathe. Jesus.
I mean, it was insane. It was absolutely insane. And
guys, this is why you listen to your wife when she tells you to go to the goddamn hospital.
Always listen to your wife. Women
it's
have
why you
stuff.
married her in the first place.
That's exactly right. Women have known this stuff since the Stone Age. Okay, we dismiss it since the Stone Age. You gotta listen to your wife. God bless her. I mean, it's true, man. She's sitting there knitting mammoth stuff. Go see Czar the doctor and have him pound you on the back. And bring that fluid out.
Oh
Jesus
man.
Christ. So now I'm depleting my reservoir of fluid. Took 26, 27 hours. It was astonishing. I mean, it's like, that was in me. It's like, how many pounds did I lose? I mean, I wanted to lose weight anyway.
We lost water,
Exactly. So they keep me in there Sunday, and it's like, we want to know why your hemoglobin count is so low. Like, too, I hope it's not cancer. I mean, we're going to find out. So they took more blood, checked for whatever oncological stuff they did. I got another, the hind end, not behind, not this, colonoscopy
Ooh,
to check, all of that.
yeah.
Did a heart scan, and my heart is fine. X-ray of the lungs. Now that's not full of liquid. It's fine. So did all this stuff. So I go home on a Tuesday, and it's like we don't know what it is.
Oh
So
God.
that's not very encouraging. What
So,
what happens when you run into this? And they say we actually do run into it fairly. It can be like little blood vessels somewhere. We're going to look for that. You're going to do it in the hospital. I have a hiatal hernia. They said that sometimes can cause it. All right. So I get out on Tuesday, whatever it was, the 4th of December or something, live, able to walk to the car. Yeah. A
yeah.
little weak.
Thank goodness.
And I mean, incredible. I mean, just absolutely incredible. And so since then, I've been seeing these doctors, and I swallowed a camera. Did you ever hear of that? Where you swallow the camera?
Yeah,
It
yeah.
takes a
The
picture every. Yeah, I forget the name of this.
endoscopy or something
That
like
came
that.
back. What's that?
An endoscopy or something like that.
It's kind of it's a camera endoscopy. Yeah, camera endoscopy. So I should know this stuff because I was a medical editor for 30 years. But
Well, you were kind of
uh,
distracted. You were swallowing a camera at the time.
just a little, yeah, just a little. But anyway, there it is. I mean, we're so unsure. The best guess, it's the hiatal hernia. I go back every 3 months. They draw blood. My iron level is fine. The hematocrit level is fine. I look at the chart online. I mean, it's there. I am fine. Um, my breathing is fine. Now, it wasn't at first. So I was taking one of these, like the thing they advertise on TV to help you breathe,
Yeah.
and it's made for people with COPD. Um, I had another one of the other pulmonologists came into the hospital. He said, I looked at Dr. So-and-so's records of you. You don't have COPD. And I said, I didn't think so. I mean, I'm just a lay person, So I go to see him, in fact, next week. So we can sort this out. We both discovered we love Homer and aliens. We didn't just talk about just full of fluid.
Yeah. Well, of course.
Am I using up all your time with this story? I really apologize.
No, this is. I don't think we're going to be able to top this. This is awesome. I mean,
I wonder if
horrifying, but also awesome that you're alive.
Well, if we think of it as a message to your listeners, if enough people listen to this, someone's going to be going, oh, like that. It's just like, maybe I better have Deborah take me to the hospital.
Yeah,
right.
Guys, get your checkups. It's kind of important.
Whenever I've gone into the doctor and I've apologized for this over a year, and I've apologized. And the nurse or someone looks at me just like, Mr. Smith, that's why we're here.
Yeah.
Okay, just do it. All right, just come see the doctor. All right, if there's nothing, especially because I'm on Medicare now, which is not as good as your system, but I'm on Medicare. So, dear God.
Any kind of public healthcare system is going to have its exceptionally shitty moments. Don't worry about it.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Trust me, there's a reason why a lot of people from Canada go to the United States for their healthcare.
See, I've heard that. Is it really? But we go to you to
not
get
for
my
everything.
drugs cheap.
Yeah, exactly. See, it's it's the mutual goodwill of our two nations.
We're cousins. We're
to compensate for the crap that our healthcare systems are all both providing to our residents.
I'll be darned. Yeah, I've heard something.
Well, our healthcare is really good for we're covered for the small stuff, but anything that's particularly weird or unusual, or also if you need something fast. The length of time you have to wait to go see somebody can be absolutely horrifying unless you go private.
That I've also heard.
Yeah.
Well, right over the border, we got Cleveland Clinic. We got Detroit. We got Mayo.
Yeah. So you hear it here first, Canadians. If you want healthcare, American healthcare, you know where to go.
Wow, is that wild? Yeah. What's in Seattle's got outstanding. I worked with doctors who were there, and it's like, man, you guys are good. So wow.
Yeah. Well, in any case, I'm glad you're still with us and still writing because you would be we would miss you for sure.
Well, I appreciate. I keep telling my daughter I have fans. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, at least one up here.
I'm going to say thank you. I'm going to say one last thing because this is about the cloning. So I wanted to get into this
Yeah.
because, and it ties in with quality. I mean, the quality of writing. Yeah, we're just about there, I guess. Hey, I am writing this book. It's not about how to write sword and sorcery fiction. I can't tell anyone that. You find out how to do it yourself. But I talk a little bit about where it came from, which is Howard and the other bright lights. And then I made it a point. I mean, we're like in another golden age. I mean, there's like so much sword and sorcery fiction being published now. I mean, I can't keep up. I don't know who can keep up. So I'm trying to use people I know as guides. I'm taking a chance on stuff, and so I'm using when I find a story I like. Oh, it's written by someone I know, and so I like it. Um, I talk about it. So look at how character is built in this story. Here's what we know about character. Here's whatever the plot. The stories are plotted. So I'm talking about that stuff as we would talk about writing fiction. The doesn't have to be sort of. It's about writing fiction.
Yeah.
And so I'm finding really good stories as examples. And I've found 3 or 4 stories that, I mean, they're just outstanding. I mean, this is literature. This should be in a short story collection. You know, I mean, Harper's isn't going to publish it, but it's good enough. If they would broaden their horizons a little bit, for the Atlantic or New Yorker or somebody. And so that kind of segues into some of my pet peeves, which I'll get into, and I'll probably make enemies. But I mean, like basing stories upon, like Dungeons and Dragons and board games.
Oh,
Yeah,
I hate
it's
that.
that's not. Yeah, that's not the way you build a plot. That's not what character comes. It's a game. Okay. Now, if you're playing the game and you get the gist of a good idea, okay, go jot it down, write it and rewrite it, till you get a story. Stuff like that. Um, but that's not where it came from. We didn't have any of that stuff in the 70s. We had Howard, Fritz Leiber, Edgar Rice Burroughs. Okay, it's kind of it. And then we go
Yeah.
back to the Victorian era.
Yeah. And before
We
that,
had
you go to
movies.
myth and legend and history.
We
And,
had myths and legends. We had Harryhausen. And that gave us all we needed because we loved that stuff for as far back as we could find it. And now we're going to start telling stories that have that sense of depth and something mythological to it, something large. It can be a quest. It can be, some of the ones I picked out. I mean, the quest is actually identity. Oh, I'll be damned. This is who I am, and this is what I found out. And it's not on the surface; it's not screamed at you. But you get to the end, you go, "I'll be damned." Look at that. So I was talking to my friend Pete Pollock, who also did a podcast. He's a sound guy. He's a sound guy. He does sound for the local theater in Chicago and bands and that kind of stuff. He's really good at this. And I forget how we started talking about how when a person originates something, as Howard did with Sword and Sorcery, it doesn't need to be that big of a thing. It might be something, like Charles Saunders with Sword and Soul. Okay. Yeah. There is something original about that, and it may draw upon myth and legend or, Howard or whatever, but there's something original about it that really, really gets us. We want to keep coming back to it. But then if you copy it, you can be inspired by it and then go off and do your thing. But if you just kind of imitate them, which is a lot of sword and sorcery, just imitate it, you start getting into this thing where it's like you made a Xerox copy, then you made a Xerox copy of that Xerox copy, you made a Xerox copy of that Xerox copy,
a Xerox copy, and so on and so forth, until all I can see is just a blank page covered in
exactly.
scrambled.
And Pete told me that there's a word for that among aficionados of audio recording: analog generational loss. So every time you move a generation away, move a generation away, there's some loss of quality.
Yeah. I mean, that applies to so much. I mean, it applies to wealth retention, and successes in businesses as different generations take on a particular business. Applies to societies in certain ways, depending on your point of view. I mean, that is just like a universal concept right there.
Exactly. So what you want to do, I mean, what Howard did, I mean, he put some elements together, you can put something original, and lo and behold, there's enough of those elements there that go back to the beginning of time, or to Victorian poets, or to something from movies. I mean, he just pulled this stuff together. It all resonates with us, and it's all big. You know, it's big. It's big emotions. It's big themes. It's big landscapes. You know, it's not Midtown Manhattan. God bless him. This is big stuff. It does something
Yeah.
else. Okay, it's kind of mythic. It's
Yeah, it hasn't been homogenized with everything else.
it homogenized is exactly the word I was going to use. Exactly, I was using in the book in the context of Dungeons and Dragons and stuff.
Mm.
Homogenizes everything. And it's like I'm trying not to make it a value judgment. I mean, God bless you if you want to play Dungeons and Dragons. I don't care. What do I care?
Fuck, I'll make it a value
That's
judgment.
right. There you go. Why not?
My show, I
But
can make
don't.
all the value judgments I want. Your stuff sucks if
Well,
you do
true.
that.
True. Don't try to pass it off as a story. And how are you going to engage us on the level of a story as we know stories should be? You know, that's what we're after here for publishing fiction. And so I really, yeah, I kind of get cranked up over that. The same with world building. I don't know where that term came from, but it's like, I mean, it's a generic term now. I read an
Yeah.
article somewhere and someone referred,
Yeah, like
world
lore
building.
has become a generic term now too.
Yeah, yeah. And it's like, you know what? One of the things that's really sweet about sword and sorcery, we don't do that crap. Okay, you got a straight line. It goes from A to B to C, maybe to Z. Okay, everything you need is kind of like Poe's dictum, right? Every word counts. Everything you need is in there. Everything you need is in there. Okay, so if we mention this weirdo city that worships a Lovecraft monster, we're not just going to throw it in there, right? We're going to use that, all right? It's like Chekhov's gun on the, above the fireplace or whatever on the wall. But it's tight and it gets you there. And there's room for characterization and there's room, for everything else. But like I'm reading Black Colossus again, I had forgotten how much Hyborian data stuff he puts in there.
Yeah.
That's not world building. He's giving you what you need, for it to work in the story. And it fills it out. It's like, man, he's got fighters from everywhere. These guys are distinct from those guys with the sword player, the, pikes and armor or whatever. And it's all there. And man, every sentence, every paragraph, there's something else. Christ. I mean, I thought I guess I've learned to like the story anew. I was a huge fan of Scarlet Citadel, Um, another
Yeah,
one
that's a
like
classic one right there. The second published Conan story.
yeah, yeah. And the other thing that's interesting is that these are early stories. I mean, this is like only the fifth, sixth, seventh Conan story that he wrote, and he was writing it. I mean, 32, so he was seeing boxing stories being published. He was right in the middle of writing a bunch of his historic medieval stories. So
Yeah,
it's easy
Hawks
to
of
see
Ultraman and stuff like that.
exactly. It's easy to see how the Conan in Black Colossus
Yeah.
could be one of those characters.
Yeah,
In
change a couple
medieval
of names
story.
and it's a Crusader story. You could put that in
Exactly.
Conan,
It's just that's where his head was at, and man,
Yeah.
does it come across. And so polished and everything. I mean, the guy was just when he was on, he was so
Oh yeah.
you know, man, oh man, and that's what I try to get across. I was down in Cross Plains in 2019. I'll let you go in a second here. In 2019 for Howard Days, and or 20, 2018, 20, yeah, 2019. Because I won the Howard biography won the award that year from the Howard Society, and so now I'm guest of honor and speech, and so I really drafted the speech. I wanted to talk about a lot of stuff I talk about in the book, why he's such a damn good writer. So why do people overlook him? And that was the gist of it. I don't have to tell you. I mean, I went through all
Yeah.
this stuff that if you want to read it, it's in a copy of Dark Man. Is that the title of the Howard? Jason
Yeah, I
Ray
believe it
Martin?
is. Yeah. I'm looking at.
Yeah, I think that's it. Um, put it out, and it's also online. They get, they videotape
Yeah.
all of the
See.
speeches and table discussion of Howard. So if you look up
Here's in
Howard
Darkman
Days,
Journal. The Journal of Robert E. Howard Literary
that's
Studies,
it.
Volume
That's it.
10,
Dark Man
Number
Journal.
2, December
Is
2000.
it? There you go. I'm online. I one of my daughter's friends. I'll let you go here in a second. One of my daughter's friends. We met because my daughter's going to go with her downtown to see a band or something. So we met in at where the halfway point, so the train station there. And there's a comic book shop there. So we went to the comic book shop. I haven't looked at comic books in a million years, but I bought a couple that looked interesting to me. But one of them, I mean, they know that I write and they know that I have a Wikipedia page. And so one of them is Mr. Smith said, "Yeah, we looked at your Wikipedia page. It says that you're not dead yet."
Well, that's good to know.
Oh, it's wonderful. Yeah, it's like I needed to check that myself. It's like it's like he is still with us or something. So I haven't looked at to see if it's still there. But I said,
That's
you
still
guys
there.
make
I've
sure
got it up here.
to take a look. I said, you guys make sure that stays on there because that is
Is
too
he
funny.
not
Oh
dead?
God.
Yes,
So they must
correct.
have been thinking that my books are so old. I must be ready for the crypt. I'm probably little do they know how close I came one.
Yeah,
Oh
and
God.
luckily you still have books coming out. Your next stories coming out, Beating Hearts Battle Axes anthology. You have the book that you mentioned that you're currently writing on Howard and
That's the one I'm writing. The heat level is between 3 and 4, I would say. So the body parts I've mentioned, the people are in love, and other than that, it's pretty much an old school sword and sorcery story.
Always looking forward to that.
So yeah, all the better. The other thing I want to mention is, the Zebra Oron books. Here's a really old beat up copy of the book.
Yeah.
I'm using it as reference because I scanned in as Word docs all of those books a couple of years ago, and slowly but surely, I'm cleaning up the Word docs and sending them to John Betancourt at I'll think of it in a second. You know what I mean? His press.
Wildside Press, I think it's called.
Wildside Press.
Yeah, they're doing the reprints for the Oron series.
So Oron is out. It's a good looking edition of Oron, and I cleaned it up a little bit. I did an interview years ago in Akron, and the woman interviewing me, she said, "Give me some years to read before your interview." So I had a copy of Oron, and she said, "It reads real young." And I thought, what an interesting comment. And I read it again. It's like, she's absolutely right, So it's not that it's badly written, but you can tell that, like, I'm so excited to be writing the story. It's so much fun. It's Errol Flynn, and it's Robert E. Howard, and it's Clark Ashton Smith, and it's Sumerian, who knows what.
Yeah.
So I did not change a lot of that.
Nor should you. It's a great book.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, it still reads really well. I added a couple of sentences here and there, like to bring to life a person in the crowd or something. I got rid of all the things where eyeballs looked across the room. That's not what eyeballs do. I mean, I suppose eyeballs do, but it's the old writing thing about, his hand reached for the clock, it's just his hand, instead of he reached for the clock, So I got rid of a lot of that stuff. But otherwise, it's pretty good, And so now I'm cleaning up Sorcerer's Shadow. The proper title is The Shadow of Sorcery. And
which is one of the final lines, actually. If you look at the last page, it literally, says here, seeing things with the shadow of sorcery deep in his haunted eyes. I mean, right there.
That's it. Yeah, I made sure to use that phrase a couple of times in there. It's a leitmotif, kind of like So, and so in light of scanning it in and rereading it, it's like, boy, this one really punches too, doesn't it? I mean, holy cow, it's sexy, it is raw, it is primitive. I'm sorry,
I think it's probably one of my favorites of your work, honestly. I've read this one, I think, more than all the other ones.
So many guys tell me that.
I mean, it's metal as fuck. So yeah, I mean,
oh yeah. it
I mean, if this reads like like a doom metal album, like so this
yeah,
is like Electric Wizard would do the soundtrack for this thing. This is good.
yep, yep. No, you're
Yeah,
exactly right.
yeah, like
It's I've thought of it both as kind of like a grand opera,
mhm.
big, and maybe more importantly like a spaghetti western.
I
I
could
mean
see that.
that's
Yeah,
yeah, it's all in there. It's all in there.
yeah. Civilizations
Sorry.
collapsing, dark magic unleashed,
Oh
curses,
yeah,
love lost
I
across past lives, all sorts of it's got
exactly,
that big operatic feel to it, but it's also got the
exactly,
blood and guts down there.
exactly. I did not hold back. I mean, I put it all in there. I mean, that's me. That's I. So
Yeah.
yes, I'm kind of proud of it.
I
So
mean, Jesus Christ, that dance number that Nidus does early on is just like, holy shit. Yeah, I can see why she got the attention of that king there.
I have a story about that dance scene too. This is it. You want to hear it? Do we have time?
Well, I am, but thank you. We both have to have places to go, but I will want to hear that story at some point. Maybe
I will
your
tell
next
you.
appearance on the
I will
show.
tell you. It has to do with zebra books of Roberta Grossman and Heavy Metal magazine. Believe it or not.
Always good
Yeah.
to
Okay,
hear.
man. Here we
Well,
go.
yeah, this has been David C. Smith, a man whose work has transcended multiple publishing eras. You can find him. His blog that he mentioned is over at davidcsmith.net. So if you want to see any info and also check bibliography and stuff along with that anthology that he's working in, Beating Hearts and Battle Axes will be in the description. David, thank you very much for coming on the show. This has been a blast.
Hey, it's been a blast for me. Um, thank you for the offer. I really appreciate this.
Well, thank
You're
you for
great.
accepting the offer.
Thank you, man. All right.
All
You
right.
take
For
care.
everybody else, we are to check it out. Adios.
Thanks, man. Adios.